Well, wind on 18 months. I'm part of the scene, and we literally just missed being ambushed by communist terrorists. So, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Rider Ramblings. Last time we were discussing the early years. Now I'm part of the scene. I need to set the scene a little bit. I do. So, my father was working as a salesman by this time, so he'd gone from being a very junior clerk to being a salesman with a territory which included most of northern Malaysia. He was based in Penang, that's where the offices were, and he covered, as I say, most of northern Malaysia, or Malaya as it was at the time, because it was still a colony. And he had, I can't remember if it was Austin A35 or an Austin A40, something like that. He had a little black Austin. And he used to visit all the little villages, the kampongs, and sell paint and fertilizer to the village shops and so on. So he was very well known around the area, and his car, so he was very well known indeed. And they knew that basically he had colour swatches and an order book in the car, and that was it. He kept nothing of interest, no food, nothing like that was ever kept in the car. And of course, being in the very, very rural areas, and it was still during the insurgency, the Communist Insurgents, the terrorists, knew this, and they knew about him. So that's the background. Anyhow, say it was roll on about 18 months, and I'm part of the story. And we were going for a long weekend, I believe it was, into the Cameron Highlands. Not sure exactly when this was, but it would be probably near Christmas time, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was for Christmas. And to get to the Cameron Highlands, you used to have to go through a city called Ipoh. And in Ipoh, in those days, to travel to the Cameron Highlands, you were supposed to go in a convoy, an armoured convoy. This had a British scout car, usually at the front, and a Bedford lorry or something like that, full of troops at the back, and everybody else would go, as I say, in the convoy. Now, my father, being well known in the area and being somewhat impatient, wasn't really prepared to wait for the convoy, so he departed with me and my mother in the car. And because I was of such a young age, we had quite a lot of baby food and powdered milk and things like this in the car. Now you have to remember that the goal of the British was basically to starve the terrorists. That was their goal, so that they gave up, and it worked very well. I mean, a lot of the terrorists did actually stop being terrorists, or they went over the border to Thailand, where there was a different goal. And in fact, the border with Thailand was, how can I put it, rather difficult. Rather difficult. So Anyhow, so basically the terrorists were starving, and what they were after was food. That's what they were after. They weren't after weapons or anything like that. They had weapons. They got lots of them. They had tons of weapons. What they didn't have was food. So anyhow, we were about halfway up the road to Cameron Highlands, and the convoy was not that far behind, probably 10 or 15 minutes behind, when gunfire erupted. We had driven through the ambush, and they'd obviously seen my father's car and decided it wasn't worth attacking, either because the convoy was on its way up or because they knew that the car usually didn't have anything of interest in for them, i.e. usually didn't have food. So quite honestly, I don't know how many people were injured in this attack and this type of thing, but as I say, they did attack the convoy behind us, and we avoided it. Now, so luckily we got to the Cameron Highlands and enjoyed our holiday, quite uneventful. Now, I don't know how we came back down. I don't know if we came down alone or we joined a convoy to come back down. It's very possible that my mother would have demanded that we were in a convoy, but I honestly don't know what happened. I don't know how we came back down and went back to Penang. So that was that. As I say, the Malays weren't really interested in the Communist Insurgents. The Malays, how can I put this, didn't like the Chinese. I think that's the best way to put it. They really didn't like the Chinese very much, and so this is probably one of the reasons why the insurgency didn't actually do what it was supposed to do and didn't take off. Anyhow, so that was Penang in the mid-1950s in northern Malaysia. About 6 or so months later, my father was on leave again, usual 6 months leave, and he was posted after his leave to Thailand, but we were only in Thailand for about a year. I don't know why it was so short. And in Thailand I learned to speak Thai. Not English. My mother was absolutely appalled. You have no idea how angry she was about that. Anyhow, that's by the by. And we were then posted back to Penang. Nothing of interest happened there. And then off to Singapore again. Now here, my father, the company my father worked for was an enormous industrial company. So a little bit of background. They sold, they were a huge agrochemical, petrochemical company. They sold agrochemicals, fertilizers, that type of thing, paints, pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, and explosives. Yeah, they also sold explosives. And my father was put in charge of the explosives side for some reason in Singapore. Now, here in Singapore, this was the main hub, the main distribution center for all the explosives of Southeast Asia. And so the company had a private island, which they rented off the government, and they had a compound on it with a number of warehouses containing mining explosives, ammunition, you name it, it was in there, absolutely full to the gunnels. And by this time I had a little brother, and how can I put this? The island wasn't well protected, or as well protected it should have been. There was a couple of jaggers, these are security guards, they're called jaggers, who were in the compound, and they were there really to keep people off the island. This was not very successful, and some people one evening decided to go to the island and have a barbecue. They managed to set fire to the island. Now, how can I put this? This was a national emergency. We're not talking, you know, a few sticks of dynamite. We're talking hundreds of tons of explosives. And although this was about 5 miles offshore from Singapore, had it gone up, basically the port of Singapore would have been totally destroyed, and most of the offices, which were on a road called Collier Quay, would have also been destroyed as well. Anyhow, luckily the fire tenders and the tugboats and so on were able to put the fire out, and it got to within a couple of feet, and I do mean a couple of feet, of the compound fence. As I say, if it had gone up, these people would have been dead. They would have been vaporized. We're talking, you know, hundreds of tons of this stuff, not just the odd ton. Anyhow, what happened was, as I say, my father was then put in charge of this, and the police and the military were used. By this time, Singapore was independent. It wasn't independent of Malaysia yet. It was still part of Malaysia, but it was independent of the UK. Singapore became independent of Malaysia a bit later. And so the police were brought in to guard the island, and the military and this type of thing, and nobody was allowed to land on the island without permission. There was a loading dock and things like that for the ships. And I do remember one time we went there with my father. He had to do a stock take or something like this, count sticks of dynamite or something, I'm not too sure exactly what, but he had to go and do that. And so we all went, my baby brother, my mother, myself and my father, and we had a special launch that took you out. Now, in those days, everybody and their dog smoked. Absolutely everybody smoked. Unless you were a baby like me, or a young child like me. And so consequently, the rules after this fire were exceptionally strict, and you had to leave your cigarettes and all smoking materials, matches, lighters, anything that could catch fire basically, had to be left on the tender, on the launch, at the dock. And they checked everything. Now, we'd brought a picnic, whereas, as I say, previously, before the fire, it was known that some people brought barbecues. But we'd brought a picnic, and of course that was searched as well. So my father wasn't very a heavy smoker, but my mother was a very heavy smoker, and this was an absolute purgatory, for her, because we had about 4 or 5 hours on the island, and you know, she couldn't smoke at all. Anyhow, my father went to do whatever he was doing actually in the compound. We weren't allowed in the compound, of course, but there was part of the island which had a nice beach and so on, and we could actually see, and I remember this, I can still see it even though it's over 60 years ago, well over 60 years ago. I can see the burning still up to the fence, and virtually right up to the fence. We're talking, you know, like really close. Anyhow, we were on the beach, enjoying swimming in the sea and doing what children do, building sandcastles, that type of thing. Generally enjoying life, and quite regularly, I'd say. I don't know how often, because I was only, what, about 5 or 6 at this time. You know, the police would actually come round doing their patrol of the whole of the island, and I do remember seeing them come round, and they did have automatic weapons, which was a very rare sight, and this is probably one of the reasons why I remember it, because it was very rare to see automatic weapons in those days. Don't ask me what they were, I was too young to know. So that was another interesting thing that we had. Now, I'm probably going to leave it there for today, because although there were no more terrorist attacks as such, there was still quite a lot of interesting events to come. So I shall leave it at that for today, and we will continue next time. As I say, this is all before my first flight unaccompanied out to Malaysia. So we got to Singapore, and I would be about 5 or 6 at this time. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.